Hi, I'm Patricia Balone with CTV News, and joining me now is former delegate Marice Morales, and she is a Rockville-based attorney and an advocate for workers' rights, which is what she's going to be talking with us about today. There has, after COVID-19 first started, there's been a boatload of changes that many workers are concerned about going back to work if and when this starts, this actually takes place, and hopefully there's no if. So when this actually takes place, what will happen in terms of their rights?
Excellent question, Patricia. So first of all, we know that the agency that has jurisdiction over these issues is the Occupational Safety and Health Agency, which is OSHA. And unfortunately, none of the COVID-19 matters have heightened any kind of liability for employers that don't go with what I believe, that don't implement policies that are in their best interest, which is to provide protective gear for a lot of our frontline workers, etc. There is, however, a set of guidelines that are helpful to some extent, but again, there's a disclaimer every section of the way, basically saying there's no added layer of liability. Essentially, the original Act of 1970 basically just requires that every employer offer a workplace free of recognizable hazards that could potentially risk a worker's life or have them suffer serious bodily injury. So nothing has really changed in terms of the liability from the employer's perspective. However, there have been a number of efforts to expand access to paid sick leave and paid family leave. So in the state of Maryland, we know of it's called Families First Coronavirus Response Act of 2020, which essentially has expanded the access to what the paid sick leave law already has. However, it's not for everybody, and I would encourage you to go on to the Department of Labor's website. But essentially, if you are employed in the private or the public sector by an employer with fewer than 500 employees, then you could have access to two full weeks of 100% paid leave. Then it would go down, the next 2 weeks would go down to 2/3 of your salary. After that, then you would have access to 10 weeks of family paid leave. And again, this is what the law says. Now the implementation and the access through our website, et cetera, is a whole other conversation. Part of the act also expanded the ability to apply for unemployment without being fired. That's essentially, the legal requirement, pre-COVID-19, pre the pandemic. So we do see that there have been, a number of efforts again, and for employers of less than 50, they may be exempt from providing paid sick leave for employees that are simply asking for time off due to, childcare because schools are closed. So it really depends on the size of your employer. It also depends on whether you have been at least working for 30 days. So the benefits do not apply to you unless you have been at least working for 30 full business days.
So I have a question. In terms of rights, you're talking about what you might be able to get out of sick leave or something down the line, but to prevent it, is there any law at this point that says a company must have their employees wear face masks, must implement social distancing? It's obviously a good idea to do, but is there a requirement on that?
So what we've seen at the federal level, the answer is no. At the state level, we have had recommendations and guidelines or through executive order that not so much for the employee, but also for the public. We've known that the state of Maryland has issued this requirement that if you're going into a public establishment that you must wear a mask, and same with the employees. But that's really more so not from a workers' rights perspective, but from a public safety perspective. And same, and it also depends on the county. In Montgomery County, we know that was one of the first to implement that. But again, it's not sanctionable through the Department of Labor, but rather through other entities that are there to protect the public health. So it would probably be the Department of Health and Human Services or any agency that regulates businesses.
All right, Marice Morales, we want to thank you for joining us. It sounds like there it's still a lot of this issue up in the air, and it will be determined, I guess, after the state of emergency is lifted.
That's correct. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.